even heard of an MV. It turned out that it meant must visit, and that earning one was like receiving the Holy Grail in the industry. Laney had been so focused on honoring her grandmother's memory by making the tea room a local destination that she hadn't even really considered that her efforts to reestablish a sterling reputation might attract attention in a broader market. Carly saw the far-off look on Delaney's face and cleared her throat to get her boss's attention. "WWMS?" Carly said, a twinkle in her eye. Laney looked up and frowned, confused. "Huh?" she uttered, still preoccupied with thoughts of the interview. "WWMS. What would Marcy say?" Carly chuckled, seeing light dawn in Laney's eyes. "Good question." Laney let out a breath that stirred the tendrils of hair that had escaped from her messy bun. Carly set the appointment book down and regarded Laney fondly, head tilted to the side. "Just tell the story," she said softly. "You love this place. Tell them about your Grandma Marcy and about your memories of baking cookies with her in the kitchen. The rest will follow naturally." Laney nodded, swallowing past the lump in her throat. "Yeah, I can do that." She smiled faintly, remembering. Over Carly's shoulder, Laney saw a dainty hand waving at them from the far side of the tea room. "We'll be right with you, Mrs. Stewart," Laney said to the older woman. "One of your adoring fans is in need of some attention," she teased Carly, who turned and saw Mrs. Stewart, then held up a finger to let her know that she'd be with her in just a moment. Carly had become something of a rock star among the retiree set, but Mrs. Georgina Stewart seemed to have adopted Carly as a stand-in granddaughter. "She probably wants to know my plans for the weekend," Carly said in a low voice, smiling widely before heading to tend to Mrs. Stewart. She'd only taken a few steps when she glanced over her shoulder and winked. "And don't worry about the interview. You'll be great." Laney hoped that would be true. While she hated to admit it, she'd grown wary of people outside of her little circle of friends. But this interview could result in free publicity for the tea room in a major way, so she had to try her best. The increased revenue that might be generated could also go a long way toward paying for the recently completed renovations of the old rose garden behind the tea room. When Laney had first moved into the once grand house that featured the tea room, the patch of land in back had been overgrown with weeds and dominated by several rows of large, dead rose bushes. She'd taken the time to research the original design for the garden and, with the help of a local amateur horticulturist, had replanted the rose bushes and added a brick path, several topiaries, and stone benches at key garden viewing points along the pebbled pathway. The hobby horticulturist, Dr. Rosemont, had spent many hours of her free time over several months digging, leveling, planting, and shaping the bushes and trees to create a beautifully open yet private space for patrons to enjoy. For her efforts, Laney had placed her on the free tea list. When she wasn't tending to a horse with a sore leg or a cat with an upset stomach, Dr. Rosemont, who also happened to be the town veterinarian, was often found in the garden sitting on one of the benches and sipping a cup of hibiscus tea. The garden was a feature of the tea room that would photograph beautifully for the interview, and the good doctor had played a major part in its success. The business growth that would inevitably come from being featured in the magazine would be spectacular, but it also meant that Laney, Carly, and their part-time server Xana would have to make a little extra effort to maintain the quaint atmosphere and close relationship with patrons that they had worked so hard to create. Laney knew she was probably overthinking things, as usual, but she wanted her message to the journalist to speak to the kind of people who would really appreciate Marcys Tea Room for its history and authenticity. Recently, she'd had a nightmare that involved serving steaming cups of dark, viscous tea with the strings of generic tea bags dangling from them.